Welcome back to another episode of Bulletproof Mindset, and today we're in the new studio. The quality of the audio might sound a wee bit different only because I've got a studio hire in right now, so I'm using another mic. But let's get into today's episode. What are we talking about today? We have a Q&A episode, but before we go into that, we got about 15 minutes talking about the sad passing of a CrossFit athlete in the middle of an event. I watched the documentary on this that's on YouTube. I'm going to leave the link below because all the proceedings are kind of going to his family, and I think it's an incredible display of what goes on in the CrossFit space, and it's a really good watch if you're into fitness. You might not be a big CrossFit fan, because I'm not by any means necessary, but I really enjoyed kind of watching I say really enjoyed, it was really sad to watch, but it kind of, it sparks something within us all to say that, like, man, life's really short, regardless of how fit we may feel, that to capture every moment to its absolute fullest. We then get into questions. We got about 6 or 7 questions, a massive variety of questions being asked in today's episode, which is fantastic. If you want your question answered on a future episode, make sure you're following the podcast page at Bulletproof Mindset __. Follow me at Coach Crossar, or you can leave a comment below this video on Spotify and YouTube. Before we get into it, you know what I'm going to say here. If you're an OG listener, then you've already subscribed. You've already left a 5-star rating. But if you're new around here, every Monday and Thursday at 6 a.m, I release an episode. And if you want to support this podcast that I'm doing, the best way you can do that is by leaving a 5-star rating and or subscribing on YouTube. So as always, thank you for tuning into this episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So we're in the new studio. Hopefully the sound quality is okay. I'm having to improvise and use different mics. This one's for show again. The OG listeners will feel my pain with this one. I think we had these show mics for so long and we just clipped on the road mics to them because we're waiting on the mixer. But I have finally done a bit of, what do you call it? Remodeling to the second studio. And this is going to be the personal studio that I use. Kind of talking already, it sounds, I don't know if it sounds echoey. Hopefully it's not echoey for you guys, but it's a pretty cool aesthetics. Now, what I want to know from you guys, let me know in the comments, whether it's Spotify, YouTube, or reach out on Instagram at Coach Crossar, is what should I do to personalise this? So this is going to be my personal studio, and this is where the guest interviews are going to be, and I've got some big plans on how I want to do some future guest episodes to make them not just dive into the stories, but also make them entertaining and get you guys involved with the type of questions that you would like me to ask certain guests. But with all that chit chat, I think let's dive into today's statement. Well, today's theme of the episodes I'll come on to in a little sec, but I've been watching the CrossFit documentary that's on YouTube, sad. So if you didn't know, sadly, one of the athletes competing in the CrossFit 2024 games passed away during an event and drowned. Man goes by the name of Lazar Djukic, if I'm saying that correctly. So an extremely emotional documentary video. Every year they do these sort of CrossFit Fittest on Earth documentaries. So this one was posted on YouTube by a channel called the Buttery Bros. So I don't know too much about the CrossFit world. It's something I'm getting into more and more of. I'll leave a link to that video below because it's about an hour and 40 minutes, and it's really, really sad to kind of watch how this event unfolded and actually seeing the pain of athletes who chose to compete. The event ended up going forward, but there's going to be a lot of backlash from the guys at the top who run this, not necessarily the athletes, but from an athlete's safety concerns. I think a lot of them are really pissed off because they've been shouting for years on, yes, we want to push the boundaries of this kind of human, what is possible for the human to achieve, but at the same time there has to be an element of safety, and I think this was sadly overlooked and at the consequence of someone's life, which is pretty scary. But statement I want to make, right? I've shat on CrossFit over the years. I've made fun, picked away at it, and albeit it's all joking, it's all fun and games. But one thing that I truly believe, right, whether you agree with me or not in this, CrossFit I would be all for. I would love to kind of get in the midst of that whole world if they were open about the use of performance enhancing drugs, because to say that the guys and girls are not taking this is complete BS. Now, I don't believe every single athlete is, but to see the boundaries that some of these athletes are pushing, and then the how their body looks, their physiologically, of how much muscle mass they have with doing all these different events, it baffles me that we are saying that these are natural athletes. And I think in a sense sets a pretty mad standard. But that's the one thing I hate about CrossFit. I hate that about any event. You could say that for football, for fighting sports, for the Olympics, because make no word of a lie, athletes will be using performance enhancing drugs. Like, it's just a fact. At the top level, there is compounds that are used by these athletes, no, across a broad range of sports. And I just wish we just fucking were more open with it. But not how in bodybuilding you have natural, and even in the natural world you've got some fucking outliers who are faking it and all that sort of stuff. But you have open bodybuilding, classic bodybuilding, who are open about the steroid use, and it's just here, we don't test for it, we don't bring it up, but we just sort of do our own thing. I honestly think that is the best way for all sports to go. I see High Rocks making their stance on this. I don't know too much about Athex, but CrossFit's like, yeah, we're drug testing all our athletes, and there's been a few competitors that have been busted for this. But why are they allowed to compete again? Because you have gained the advantage of being on this. So I just don't know. It just seems daft to me. And I wish it was one thing they just went, right, here, we're just not going to say it. We're not going to test. We're going to let athletes choose to do what they want to do. We're going to encourage the support of blood markers, lipid levels, all these different things of what you can do to monitor from kidney function to heart health to just all round MOT for the body. But it's not something we're going to test for. And I think you'd be very surprised of how many people would have this weight relief on their shoulders because they're not having to lie. But it's very, I don't know if it's the American culture, but it's very cheesy to watch the kind of camaraderie and all that they have. But an extremely sad documentary, one I highly encourage every single person to watch, especially if you're into fitness. You don't need to be into CrossFit. There's one thing I've said this many times on the podcast before, I've changed my mind on a little bit. I've changed my mind on massively, because the competing element, there is a drive within us all. I genuinely believe if you're into fitness, you've kind of scratched this itch with when you're competing in something and you're starting to get really good at something, you like to get into an environment that really tests you. And that's why things like High Rocks and all that sort of stuff. Speaking of, myself and Gillian are doing High Rocks in about 8-9 weeks in Madrid, which I'm excited for. But also me and James, yep, do you remember that guy? Fucking prick. But me and James are competing at Athex in Glasgow as well, so I'm really excited for that. The event is definitely structured towards me and James putting a good graft in to aim for first place. There's no word of a lie. I've said to him, like, I want to win. So the event itself is 5 rep max squats, 10 rep max overhead press, strict press, no jerking, all that sort of stuff. One weakness of mine is squats. One weakness of James is probably overhead pressing or pressing. And both of us come together for that event. I'm really excited for. The endurance side of thing as well is just power. It's just pure power output. 12 minutes max distance. So for 12 minutes, you max distance run on the curve runner. 12 minutes max distance row on the rower. Where else would you row? The skier. So the 12 minutes, after the 12 minutes is up, you swap with your partner, and then it's total distances accumulated. And then there is a Metcon, which I'm not saying Metcons are easy, but they're not difficult. For me to kind of lift a 17.5 kilo dumbbell above my head or a 12.5 kilo dumbbell above my head, it ain't that hard to do thrusters with it. Yes, okay, there's higher reps and you have to do them synchronized and then do burpees and all this sort of stuff, but if I'm being honest with you, I don't find that stuff that hard to train for, because it's a matter of exposure. 6 weeks out and you've got it. Like, I have the technique and the ability to do all these exercises, and I'm not being like big-headed with that. That's a fact. If you look at any top athlete that are competing in High Rocks, they're not doing High Rocks all year round. They're improving their run speed. Then when it gets to High Rocks, they specifically bring in those movements and run the full simulation a couple of times a few weeks out to get them ready for it. Yes, there's weaknesses that you might find without that, but me and James will probably do a test run through in the next week or two, and then that honestly gives us like 8-9 months to prep for this. That's how much grit is going into this, and I'll be very disappointed if he doesn't up his game with the running, because I know he likes to run short runs. But here, if there's an event that we potentially could win, I think it generally is this event. So really excited for that. When it comes to High Rocks, aspirations, would love to win one of them, but I think where my running is at, and I think Jill will say the same with us, it ain't anywhere near where it needs to be to kind of take first, second or third place. Like, that event is only getting better and faster and faster and faster. Now, our time on that one was like 1 hour 15 or 1 hour 14. I can't remember exactly. So the time I would like to try and dominate is under 1 hour 10. I think we definitely had that in us last time we competed. We just fucked up a couple of stations, and now that we've ran through one, I think we'll be better suited for the flow of how we get through that. So the goal is to try and beat 1 hour 10. In my head, I think I want to say it. In fact, I'm going to commit to it out loud. I want to beat 1 hour 5. I think that would put us in a very elite category, which I believe we can do. I don't know if we can do it necessarily in the next 8 weeks, because the biggest weakness just now is running. My running pace is about a 5:05, 4:55, and Jill's in the kind of 5:30s. So we're kind of way off to some of these high level competitors, but where we excel is definitely the ability to show up in the stations. So that's, sometimes you win some, sometimes you lose some, but that's where we're at with a little life update. Things are going really well in the studio and all that sort of stuff as well. And I had planned to announce something at the release of this podcast, but I have struggled to get the plans in motion. But that will be something that comes out over the month of September. I will be releasing spots back to work with me on a 1-to-1 basis, but I'm going to do small group PT. So it's not going to be 1-to-1, it's going to be 1-to-4 or 1-to-6. And I'm going to run, like, the best way to describe this is, like, I hate the word boot camps, but not in the sense that you know boot camps. So it'll be an 8-week workshop. There'll be workouts here 3 times a week, and there'll also be designed workouts that you can do in your own gym at your own time. You come here 3 times a week, and then from there, we shall progress your strength, your power, your performance. And I'm going to run a couple of these. There's going to be some beginner focused, some consistency focused, and some other ones that are for maybe higher performing individuals that have events and whatnot coming up. So stay tuned for that. Now, today's episode, I want to jump into a Q&A. I threw up something on my stories a couple of days ago and screenshotted some questions. And as much as I wanted to continue the theme of Ozempic, there's going to be a few more episodes coming out with this. I had a guest episode lined up for bringing on somebody that has a pharmacy that prescribes this, but they can't come on. Essentially shit in the bed. No, they haven't really, but they can't come on, so it could negatively impact the sales and their business. So I've reached out to a couple of people that I'm hoping will come on and discuss this, because it's not a fucking taboo subject. It's a weight loss drug. We want to know the safety of how we use it and not be stupidly biased to say that this is a miracle drug, which it absolutely isn't. So we'll circle back round to that in the next week or so, and hopefully I'll have a guest that can align with that. So questions then. Let's get into the first questions. The first question. It's a really good question to think about. So there's a lot of people running just now. The 10k steps is something that's been thrown out there a lot. But this question was asked, how many minutes on the bike would be a decent substitute to do it for 10k steps a day? Not able to walk much due to an Achilles injury. So Achilles injuries, they are coming out rife just now, left, right and centre, because of the influencer running era. So many more people are running, which is great, but there is a bunch of injuries off the back of that, niggles, pains and all that sort of stuff. And that's where you'll see this sort of spike in weight gain, should I say, because you're used to sort of moving your body, you work up your max capacity week in, week out, and then boom, something happens. So your capacity has to drop back, and because it's a fucking important joint, yes, you might not be able to run, but if you can't run, more likely is you can't walk as well. So how long should you do in the bike? Well, it really depends. It's a good question to think about. I would say, honestly, If it was a like-for-like substitute, which it's never going to be, anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour is a good substitute for it. You could go longer and you can go longer, but if you're fortunate enough to have a bike in the house, split it up 3 times without the day, and I would do 25, 25, 25. Do it after every meal. Keep the intensity very moderate, very light, and just get the body moving. Like, that is the best way to kind of go about it. And this is interesting because you think, like, oh, we prescribe 10,000 steps a day to get people moving. And it's not from a calorie burn side of things. Like, if I'm being honest with you, it's not. It's the energy levels that you reap from that. It's the help with digestion, with just overall flow and production of your body. So regardless of whatever injury you are nursing, there is always something you can do. And that's probably the main takeaway from this one. I don't care if you've hurt your shoulder, if you've hurt your hip, if you've hurt your Achilles. Change it up and make sure that something is being substituted for it. It might be something extremely light. In fact, one more point I'll circle on this and says, don't worry too much about the time. What can you squeeze in? Because if you can only squeeze in 20 minutes, why don't you start there? See what sort of reward you can reap from that. And just by moving that, it might be an intense mobility session you want to do. It might be just some upper body work. Yeah, there's a ton of things that you can sort of substitute for this. Okay, second question I got here was, what makes people crack and why they give in and how to prevent it. So I guess this can be, it depends what situation you're going through. This could be related to health and fitness, just general mindset, relationships. There's so many ways that this can be perceived. But let's take it in the sense of health and fitness. And I would say most of it, off the top of my head, what comes to my mind or where I've seen people quote unquote crack, where they then give up with something, is because they don't see results. And usually that's driven from this high standard of expectations of what they expect to get. Now, let me put you in the picture. Let's say you're someone and you're like, right, I'm going to give this working out a go. Why is it I'm working out? Well, I'm working out because I don't like the body shape that I am. And I've seen Sandra or Tom or Susie or whoever it is, and they done this diet and they done this workout and they got these results. So I expect that I get these results. So I'm going to try and do it. I don't care how hard it is. So what do? They go into a high intensity environment, which is super hard to adapt to. And they muster through it for the first couple of weeks. But for what they're putting in compared to what they're getting out at this point, the scales are tipped too heavily to the effort that's needed to put in. And over a period of time, the motivation dies off simply because they don't get the results that they wanted. And that's really what it comes down to. Let's flip this scenario to the relationship one. Why would someone crack and throw a hissy fit with their partner? Well, it's probably because there's been a lack of communications and standards have been misaligned on whatever's going on. It's really what it comes down to. It's always communication. It's always expectations. And sometimes we need to communicate those expectations, particularly if you're in a relationship. I know that firsthand. Now, when it comes to mindset's an interesting one because mindset is absolutely everything that we do. It's very good to have a growth mindset, positive mindset, and a positive outlook. But why so many people default or can swing the other way? And look, sometimes it's just the culture that you've been brought up in, the environment, the circle of friends, the bias of your attitude towards life. But what would make you crack and give up on something is done in the mind. You don't see the value aligned to why you really want to do it, or you don't care for much about it. Now, I'm not saying you can't have any low days, but you can mitigate the low days by the bounce back, the swing, the pendulum swing that I've spoke about time and time again. So how to prevent this then is a very interesting one. And again, it's always going to be person dependent. So that just gave me an idea whether I just do an actual deep dive episode on this. But if I had to prevent, how do I stop myself from falling off when it comes to my workouts, when it comes to my nutrition, when it comes to my mindset towards something? The answer is simple. You don't. You don't. You will. You need to expect that this will happen. You will miss a workout. You will miss the nutrition thing. But it's not just accepting that at that moment in time. It's going, right, okay, that happened, but it's happened. So now let's look forward and pay attention to what's going to happen today or the next day or wherever you fall into this. And that's really the difference between those who have success and those who don't. the ones that have the ability to minimize that pendulum swinging, rather than swinging one direction. Oh, I missed my nutrition meal, or I missed my workout, so I'm not just going to work out the rest of this week, and I'll pick up again next week. Next week comes around, it's like, I can't be arsed now, and then before you know it, you're 6 months off the gym. It happens very quickly. It creeps up on you very, very quickly. Now, the same with workouts is the same with nutrition. If anything, nutrition's a harder one because you're surrounded by it 24/7, 3 times a day. Sometimes the gym's only a couple of times a week, and it's like, right, cool, let's get that done. Boom, done, gone. So being able to prevent it is definitely things you can do, but I think the most important part of this conversation is understanding that you can't. It's going to happen. It happens to the best of us. But what you can do is mitigate how long you stay in that hole for, and hitting the reset button. My favourite ways to hit the reset button is prep a good nutritious meal. And I say that from whatever it is that you consider nutritious. It's a very subjective thing to say, which I get. But for me, I'm like, right, you know what? I know when I eat this type of food, I feel really good after it. And I mean like the feeling of not feeling bloated or feeling full. So for me, it would be kind of whole source of protein. Oh, I could pick a couple here, but if I just think my go-to is like eggs and bacon, I'll go, right, I'm going to start with that because I know I digest that pretty well. I'm going to go get outside and hit fucking fresh air and sunlight. Might not get too much sunlight in Scotland, but they're the two things that I combine that with. And then the last one is making sure I get a good, consistent night's sleep. If I do that for a couple of days in a row, before I know it, I'm starting to get my energy back and get my spark and fire back to getting back to it. And sometimes you'll need to go deeper with this and realign your why and your goals and your purpose, because let's be honest, if it's something that you don't truly believe in, then that's going to be more of a hindrance than actual missing. That's the reason why. It's not because you're not consistent, it's because you don't care enough, right? So that wraps up that question. Now, a couple other questions here. People want reaction videos, want to know the Cooper's perfect day. Don't worry, that one will be coming soon because that bangs on Instagram. Okay, so the next one was, is it possible to build muscle without strength training? No, it's not. People will argue this, that you can build muscle by doing these little sharp movements, using body weight and all this sort of stuff. But in a way, that's strength training, right? So there's a two-pronged approach to this. You can build some muscle depending how new you are to this. So for example, if you run, then you'll build up a bit of strength, maybe even a bit of muscle in the lower part of your body with that repetitive motion. If you do body weight push-ups, then absolutely you will build a little bit of muscle to begin with, but it isn't sustainable because it's very hard to progress your body weight. You have to go from kneeling press-ups to normal push-ups to elevated push-ups to handstand press-ups. Like, there's only so many progressions that you can do with body weight, and the strength training part of using resistance weight is the only way that you can build muscle. So see these like Les Mills boxing, Les Mills dancing, you will not build muscle in that. Just bear that in mind. Now, I'm not saying don't go to them, because I think there's a value. They're pretty fun. They look like good fucking crack, good banter, good bit of community in there, dancing about, having the enjoyment factor, because that's a big important part of why we're consistent with certain things. But we need to be strength training. I don't say that often with many phrases, but I absolutely truly believe that every single person needs some element of resistance training on a weekly basis, no matter their age, no matter their circumstance. There is always something that we can do, and that only has to be one time a week. I would say the bare minimum, every single person on this planet, one time a week doing some sort of resistance training. Now, within that realm, there can be a lot of diverse ways of how you do that. For some, it can be body weight. For some, it can be resistance bands. For others, it can be a 200 kilo back squat, right? There's too many variables in there to dive into, but just take note that there is no way that you can build muscle unless there is resistance training, right? Any of these shakes, protein powders, nutrition classes that say that you can do this, you absolutely can't. You need 3 important factors to build muscle. You need the resistance element, and you need the progressiveness of the resistance element to be consistent over a 4, 5, 6 week period. So what that would look like, it's 10 squats at 20 kilo one week, and then it's 12 squats at 20 kilos the next week. Does that make sense? 14 squats at 20 kilo the following week, or you increase the weight. I've done a really good progressive overload episode on this, which you can find in the library if you just type in Bulletproof Mindset, progressive overload. I'll leave a link in the show notes as well to it if you want to go and check that out. That is the ultimate ways to build muscle. So you need the resistance, you need the progressiveness, and you need protein. You need to have a sufficient amount of essential amino acids and protein. Good whole protein, right? That's really what it comes down to. I know that sounds like a meat, protein. Like that's just the whole meathead response, but it is so valuable. And yeah, there's no other way that you can do that. You can't do one or the other. That's another important factor as well. You need to have the three. You need to have all three combined: resistance training, progressive overload, protein, right? The 3 Ps. No, the first one didn't start with P. How do we make it start with P? Power strength training. Power strength training, progressive overload, and protein. There we go. That sounds better. Okay, on to the next question. We got a couple more to run through. Range of motion gets compromised for me when I lift heavy. Is it better to go lighter and deeper range of motion, or stay with the heavier with more limited range of motion? This also happens with my ability. I tend to swing a little the heavier I lift. Very, very common one. I see this with maybe 90%, in fact, all my clients, I would say, as we start to progress the weight and get into that 3 rep max threshold, there's always usually a response from our body that goes to its old ways, its old patterns. So whether that is you're used to squatting ass to grass for a little while and then you increase the weight, you've got this safety mechanism that's in your brain that's like, mate, you ain't got this. So it's already talking you out the lift before you go into it. Now, range of motion, I always say, is the key, right? Always go for range of motion. The only time I would say don't worry too much about the range of motion, or full range of motion, should I say, is if you are competing in powerlifting. Work to the standards of the powerlifting meet or strongman meet that you're doing, and because that's what you're training for. Arguably, that's going to be a little window of competition in your life. It's going to be a season. There's not many people that I know that will continually keep competing in bodybuilding and powerlifting and strongman unless they're dedicating their whole life towards that sport. So I think for most of us, it's good to always train full range of motion. So to answer this question, I like to keep it lighter, work on that full range of motion, because let's say, argument's sake, I can squat 100 kilos full range of motion, okay? But when I put 120 kilos on the bar, I can only do partial range of motion, or my range of motion is limited. If I just work in the 100 kilo range of motion and slowly try and progress my strength, or add in a couple of different strategies to get stronger in that range of motion with the lighter weight, then I will gain more strength and more power by using lighter weight. I think that's a big misconception, that you have to lift heavy to get big or build muscle. It isn't the case whatsoever. Again, circling back to the progressive the progressive overload episode, the 10 or 11 different strategies that I used in that, weight and sets and reps is one element, but there's things like pausing, slowing the eccentric down, supersetting, kind of fatiguing the muscle group before you go into it. There's so many different ways you can make lighter weight work for you, and that is an episode that is on the cards that's coming up. So should have probably kept that one for that, but that is the best way I can sort of answer that one. When you swing a little, or if you feel that you just a little bit to the left when you're squatting, for example, that can be normal, right? It's something that I wouldn't write off, as long as your range of motion is down and up, and not every rep looks like that. But the closer you get to that failure part, the closer you get to that absolute max rep, there's going to be little shifts within your body. A common one, the knees want to collapse in, the chest wants to fold over in our squat. So fighting against those cues is the important thing that you're doing. And as long as you're doing that, then you are sound. You're completely fine. Now, if you're PRing or you're trying to max out every single lift in the gym, then your programming is wrong, right? I would ease up. That should be something that you're doing maybe every 4 to 5 weeks. It shouldn't be a weekly occurrence in the gym. As long as, well, especially for 1 rep maxes, should I say, or 1 rep or 3 rep maxes, it's quite taxing on the central nervous system, the brain, just everything that the body requires to output that much energy. Okay, a couple more questions is, what's one fitness myth that you think needs to be busted once and for all. One fitness myth. So obviously I done fitness myth a few Mondays ago on this on the podcast. A fitness myth that comes to mind just now that I wish we would stop, I wish we would just overcome completely, is the association with working out in a gym and being a bodybuilder. I wish that didn't exist. I understand why it does, and I think rightly so. I get it, but training with resistance, training, strength training in general, all your different movement patterns, isn't to look like bodybuilders. That is a completely niche style that is used within the gym, but so many people associate the gym with that. And because they do that, a lot of people don't care to go to the gym because they think, I don't really care about looking like a bodybuilder. But if you flip the question a little bit, it's like, oh, do you want to live longer? Do you want to have more independence? Do you want to not suffer from arthritis and sarcopenia and all this sort of stuff where as we age, do you want to have the energy and the ability to play with your kids and your grandkids the older that you get? Do you want to enjoy retirement? Yeah. Well, fucking go to the gym. You know what I mean? So that's my biggest frustration with the myth that the gym is just for bodybuilders. And I know some people listening to that, it's like, I don't think that. You're one of the small minorities of that. In fact, I'm going to do a test and I'm going to go to Airdrie High Street and I'm going to just hopefully stop random people and just ask, do they go to the gym? And if not, what is the reason for not going? Because I'm genuinely curious. And anytime I've done some of this quote unquote market research, the answer is always, I don't care about having a six pack. I don't care about being all jacked and muscular. It's like, it's a fraction of why people go to the gym. Even bodybuilders, even the guys who put a high emphasis on how they look, don't go to the gym for that. They are not replacement for therapy, but it's an element where they can manage their stress. And if you can find an environment where you can manage your stress, then man, you are winning in life. So a wee bit ranty there, and look, I know it's not just a matter of just going to the fucking gym because it's a very intimidating place for a lot of people, but it's something I highly believe every single person should be doing. And that is my mission, to help you get there. So if you'd like to know how to get into your first gym session and get to the gym, then leave a comment below or send me a message at Coach Crossar on Instagram and we'll walk through your process. Let me help you. I'll get you in there because there's a couple of things that you can do to overcome your first gym session. And imagine you do. Imagine that thing that you're feared of, that you manage to conquer that. Think how empowering and how much confidence you'll reap from that. Okay, how do you take care of your mental health while staying up on top of your fitness goals? How do you take care of your mental health while staying on top of your fitness goals? So I guess I think maybe this question's been asked and a bit of a misunderstanding of what my fitness goals are. When I'm competing, absolutely there's a higher stress or higher ask of me to work out consistently because I have a plan and I'm following the plan, and off the back of the plan there is an event that I'm competing at. But a majority of the time for my own competing, the managing my mental health is very linked and closely related to why I work out or why I have certain fitness goals. Now my fitness goals is things like make sure I can squat 100 kilo. Or in fact, let me kind of break this down. Make sure I can squat 2 times my body weight. Make sure I can make sure I can deadlift 2 times my body weight. Make sure I can bench 2 times my body weight. Now I can't bench 2 times my body weight, but they'll be sort of goals that I have in the background. Now when I sort of break them down and when I've kind of fallen away from working out, it's because when I say fallen away as well, I've still worked out 2 or 3 times. Or let's be honest, sometimes I've worked out once or twice over the last couple of months just within a week, and it's been full body routines. Some of them's just been mobility, and to me that's taking care of my fitness, right? Fitness goals can be molded and shaped into something that we think we want, and then make sure it's not so static that it's like this statue that can't be moved. It's like, I want a six pack and that's all I want. It's like, right, cool. There's a lot of things that go into getting a six pack, and as you get on that journey, it's like, man, I'm really struggling to keep up with what I need to do to maintain or get this six pack. It's like, right, then have it more of a mold, shape it into something else. What some of the other things could be, pivot that fitness goal. And I've got a client just now and she's like, I'd never be able to run a 5k. She's 3 months in, over the age of 50 and absolutely smashing it. She just ran for an hour and 10 minutes the other day. I think it was 8K she ended up getting. Incredible achievement. So being able to mould the journey so the journey initially comes like I'm not showing up for myself. I'm not lifting weights. I want to get back to that. And as we started that journey, that shaped into, I'd love to be able to run, but I don't think I can do it. It's like, here, why not? Why don't we try 1 run a week, 2 runs? And then before we know it, we've hit an incredible goal. So let me kind of reread this. So yeah, that's how I take care of my mental health. I think if you're consistently showing up for yourself, that helps with your mental health. If it doesn't, again, it might be something you want to seek more advice on. Maybe go down the route of therapy, maybe get a second opinion, speak to a friend, speak to someone about how you're feeling. But I've found that the best way that I've taken action with, or I've solved, maybe not solved, or bettered my mental health is through the action that I've taken. Not just speaking about it, not just talking about it, is actually doing some of the things I said I would want to do. And that leads to confidence, and then with confidence, it then opens up more doors, more opportunities. Okay, last question here is, where are we? How do you deal with social situations? Oh, this is a really good one, actually. So I put this one in here, last one to finish on. How do you deal with social situations that tempt you to stay away from healthy habits? An extremely, extremely challenging one. Now, let's start with a healthy habit. Let's define a healthy habit. Well, a healthy habit is when you're not eating chocolate. I'm joking. Healthy habit is like good food and bad food. It is very subjective. What makes food good? What makes food bad? Ask 100 people, you'll get 100 different answers. Now, within that, you might get some similarities, but the same goes for healthy habits. And I understand the question that this person is trying to ask is they're maybe going to environments, they're on this health and fitness journey, and they feel that when they go in some environments, their health and fitness journey takes a back step. Well, for me, it comes down to the people that you're hanging about with. Are you communicating what it is that you're doing and why you're doing it? And let's say, I'm just assuming here, but let's say it's around alcohol. If you want to drink alcohol, by all means drink it. You might want to modify some of the settings that you're in. Have around, skip around, go from the cocktails with tons of things in it to the spirit and diet drink, or go from, sometimes it's just the awkwardness of holding something in your hand. Just get maybe not a can of juice, go for the alcohol-free drinks, beverages. They can be a really good lever to pull on to kind of make these social settings a wee bit easier to do. Now, it can be very hard when you go to parties and go to something that revolves around food, because I don't personally, when I've been on the foods that I enjoy, and I know the foods that I don't do too well with, like your chuck it in the oven, heat it up, like chicken nuggets, like, you know what I mean, like cocktail type of food. When I'm at events with that, I find it very hard to not eat it, but then my stomach's in bits the following time. And I think you just need to have the awareness of, like, I can eat this if I want to eat it, but bring yourself back to, how do you really feel? And that's maybe the best advice I can give on that. Like, healthy habits, sometimes a healthy thing might be to, like, you might want to skip that one because you're not fussed about going out to the clubs and partying and that sort of thing. So, but what I would say is make an effort of replacing that with something. Make an effort of saying, here, I don't want to do this with you guys, but can we do this? Would anyone be up for this? It's a hard one. It's a tricky one. I'm kind of making this out around the alcohol thing, because I think this is what most people struggle with. I think a lot of people will struggle to have fun without alcohol, and I'm not saying that from a judgment point of view. It is absolutely true, but the reality is that you just need to do some inner work, and that might be the health goal, that might be the fitness goal, because that is you shaping your mindset and changing the way you look at things. So hopefully that answers that question. When it comes to the next day and the day after and the day before, you can do there's tons of strategies like banking and doing all these different things. I wouldn't advise any of that. All I would say is, see, the day after some of these social settings, you might not feel like it, but plan something that you're doing for you, from a fitness level, from a nutrition level, from a self-care. It might just be, I'm going to have a bath and do a face mask and facial moisturise routine, saying this as if I'm one of these guys that knows the ins and outs. For a typical guy, it's just warm water in the face, and Jill's like that to me. What sort of face cream are you using? And I'm like, warm water. So self-care, like it could be the haircut. Plan a haircut the day after a social setting, make you feel good. Plan something. That might not go well because the social setting, I'd imagine you want your haircut for, but you get what I mean. There's ways that you can show up for yourself. Plan a wee yoga session, a wee mobility, a walk, or whatever it may be. Plan something that day after. And again, it goes back to the pendulum swing. We want to mitigate how long we stay in this swing state and being able to project back to your quote-unquote healthy habits or back on track to where you were before. But just because you go to a social setting doesn't mean you fell off track, right? I hate this. It's very hard to get through to clients that are stuck in this mindset because it's like 30 years of trying to unpack the good and the bad. It's like, that's not bad. It's like, do you like drinking beer? Yeah, I love it. Do you like your friends you hang about with? Well, yeah. It's like, right, fucking go and enjoy yourself then, right? Stop being so tied to this like, this is good, this is bad. We need more awareness around both situations are good and both can be bad. In fact, there's no good and bad, it's neutral. There is no good and bad, it's just neutral. And you might associate it with being bad. You might go, why is that bad? Or because you've got a hangover the next day. Well, if you've got a hangover, do you maybe want to like ease off the alcohol? Are you prepared to do that? If the answer is no, it's like, right, cool. Do you swap out some of the alcohol? Do you kind of mitigate? How do you bounce back from that hangover? There's so many strategies that we can go into with that, but that's maybe a bit of food for thought to help you with that one. So with that being said, that wraps up today's episode. Hopefully you enjoyed today's chit chat in the new studio. Hopefully the sound and the quality is okay. I don't think it's going to be as good as the previous episodes because I am using the mics that I use for my reels. But a couple of call to actions, a couple of things before you go. If you are local to Airdrie, I would love for you to come over and join us on the lifting clubs that we do on Sundays. They're completely free to join. If you have any kids over the age of 7, there is a parents and kids lifting club that kicks off at 8:45 to 9:45. And then there's the OG lifting club for 16-year-olds and over from 10 till 11. Both are completely free to join. We'd love to see as many of you guys there as we can. They're getting really good, really popular, and yeah, we're really having fun lifting weights. There is always a progression and a regression exercise regardless of your experience, so don't worry. There's people turned up to this and not lifted weights in the last couple of years and have managed to go into this environment and have fun and be around other people, like a different environment of people that are on the same path as you, which is the main benefit. So as always, thank you for listening. If you haven't left a rating, then why the fuck not? Go and rate that for us, please. 5-star rating, subscribe on YouTube, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys on the next one.